So we're here with lead coach Tom from the Padel School, and today we're going to talk about a subject that is really difficult for tennis players coming to padel, and that is changing your forehand. You had a big forehand in tennis?
Yeah, my forehand was my biggest shot, my biggest weapon. Came to padel and I realised I needed to change it.
So that's what we're going to talk about today. 4 tips on how to change your forehand from tennis to padel. So before we go into the technique, let's discuss what a weapon for the forehand in padel looks like. In tennis, it's easy, isn't it? You know, you hit your big forehand, you want to hit past your opponent or set up the point. But in padel, a weapon for the forehand is very different.
It's all about accuracy and it's all about the speed of the ball. Very different to tennis.
Yeah, and you want to be able to hit chiquitas, be able to hit lobs and, you know, hit to those gaps with, like you said, controlling speed, so soft or a little bit faster.
Yeah.
So the first tip that we're going to do for the forehand is to remove the loop. So show us what a lot of tennis players do that you have on court.
So a lot of tennis players come to the padel court and they immediately start in this position. Okay, so they start with their wrist cocked and the racket up.
And in tennis, they do that to generate racket head speed, right? Like that's a way of getting power on that racket. We obviously don't need that in padel. So yeah. What should they be doing instead of that?
So as opposed to starting in this position, I get a lot of my players to take the racket back and the angle is here and the racket is down straight away.
And this will make you so much faster in front of the glass, but also will help you after the glass. So tip number 2 is to remain compact, because even I see a lot of players coming back into this position here, but the arm is away from the body because they still think they're going to try and generate racket head speed. So where should this racket be when we take it back?
Yeah, so like you say, as opposed to having this gap here, what we want to try and do is keep that to a minimum. So we actually want to keep it quite compact into our body so we don't have that loop.
Yeah, and this is more important. So in this position, particularly off the glass, people are often moving their arm away and they're having a big gap here, and therefore they've got to swing through rapidly on this ball. And that's what we want to cut out. Is there a good exercise that you would use to keep people compact?
Yeah, we can use a tennis ball. So what we tend to do is we get the players to put a tennis ball in between their elbow and they tuck it into their body to hold it in. Yeah. So it gives them a feeling of keeping that compact swing as they go back.
And that feels really weird, but it's actually quite a good practice just to get them a little bit more compact on the shot. So the third tip is around the footwork, taking small steps in padel. What do you often see from tennis players coming to padel?
You see big steps, big, large, powerful steps that you would use in tennis to cover the distance to get to the ball, but in padel it's very different.
Yeah, and you see a big, setting the base, don't you? Like that's a big thing in tennis is, right, we're going to set our base so we have a good platform to create power, but here it's more important that you're nimble with smaller steps. And a big problem that we see is when players, if you go into the position now, if the ball is going to go off the back glass and they set their base before the ball bounces on the glass, then they often end up out of position. So the third tip is have small steps when you want to adjust, whether it's in front of the glass or after the glass. So our fourth tip is to minimize the wrist movement on the shot. Now, I remember your tennis from forehand, like you said, it was a weapon, and you had quite a lot of wrist to brush up that ball to create lots of spin.
Yeah. Well, in tennis, for me, my goal was to use my forehand to create that spin and create that power to win the point. And in padel, you don't need to do that.
Yeah. So, in padel, the first thing to do is you will use a little bit of wrist to control the ball on contact and control the direction, but you don't need this wrist drop or flick, both with topspin, but also you see tennis players kind of doing this with the slice as well. So our fourth tip would be to minimize the amount of wrist movement. So if you identify that you're doing, one of those 4 errors, ideally our recommendation is to try and fix one at a time. Don't try and change all 4 because you'll end up getting a bit confused, but see what you're doing wrong out of that and then fix that. For me, I came to padel and I was using too much wrist to try and flick the ball, create topspin instead of learning to hit flat.
Yeah, for me, my natural instinct on a forehand was always to start in this position. So for me, changing that to go more compact and keep it, down was difficult. And
it is really difficult because, both of us played 20 plus years of tennis. So you're trying to change habits. So, really good conscious focus practice can change that, but you have to do it one step at a time. So if we want to identify which of those errors you're making, the best way to do is to video yourself. Now, if you're in our Padel School Plus community, put that in our community so myself, Tom, and the other coaches can give you some technical feedback. But really, players want to learn to hit soft, don't they?
Yeah, and it's great to practice it in matches as well. Even if you can't get on the training court and you can only get on the match court, you know, practice all of these tips when you're playing the match. And we've also got a course on this, the Lob and Chiquita course, which can be found here.
Yeah, and I'm also going to put up on this side a video about how to hit softly during your games.